Apologies, folks. We're having just got to get Kyle in here and
technical difficulties.
Some slight technical difficulties. All right, got it. So that's where. Yeah, one moment.
Haha! I'm two screens.
Yeah, it's gonna look crazy for about 2 seconds. Everyone's gonna see me editing on the fly. We're not recording yet. It's just easier if I do it this way.
I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can still see my screen without it taking up all of my vision.
All right, and let's get Kyle's video into here.
Or I could just do this, just overexpose myself.
Whoa, inappropriate.
So much light.
Why doesn't it like... That's interesting.
Actually, that kind of solves my problem. I might just keep doing that.
What is that? What is going on? All right. So yeah, we're just going to remove that. And... Yep. Maybe. Maybe. You want to be nice? You want to be nice? You want to be nice? Nope. There we go. Wonderful. And then turn the filter off. Hey everyone, it's web design on the fly. All right, got it. All right, good to go. Make sure. Yeah, now I'll start recording. Cool. Good to go. Whenever you want to start.
All right. Well, guess do we do the theme song now? How do we do this?
So I was gonna say, like, we can add that into the podcast later if we don't want to do it live.
Cool.
That would be easier for them to edit. So how do you want to do your intro?
All right, everybody. Welcome to the first new. We're not calling it a reboot. Retro Rejects. So tonight we are going to be discussing really the main event of the Star Trek universe, which is Star Trek Discovery. We're majority of the way through season 3. We've got 2 episodes left in the current season, and we're just going to sort of go over how is it, should you watch it? Is this a show that's worth your time as a fan of genre or just as a fan of TV? Yeah, I personally think so, and I think we're going to be able to convince you of that. So I guess first things first, is it good, actually? What do you think?
Yeah, I know this is complicated because of the Abrams verse of New Trek has just created quite a division in the Trek universe. I know I'm not as big of in that sphere as you are, or Trevor, like some of our other writers and people that have been involved in the past. But just from what being in the movie side of things, like I know I visibly feel that, and I think like a lot of that got thrown on Discovery in the first season, and that's fair. Like that's not someone just pulling Abrams' hate out of their ass. Like they're legitimately like, no, this wasn't good. And I think where we've gotten to now is like leagues past where it started at. And I just have enjoyed watching that journey. And I think that also has helped me like stomp for it more than I probably would have, because I went through it all. And now we're in season 3 and I'm like, it's like we've been rewarded for that patience.
I would agree with that. Also, for our audio listeners and for people who have not seen, no, nobody's seen me on this feed. We're currently doing this live on Twitch for everybody who's going to be listening to this afterward on the pod. But I'm Kyle Nelson. I am one of the editors for Nerd Union. We've got the estimable Kenneth Shipp here with me, producing and co-hosting. He's the current editor-in-chief of Nerd Union, the host of the Commander Shipp show and State of the Nerd Union, all of our Twitch stuff. So yeah, I would say I agree with you as far as Discovery goes. I feel like season 1 is a bit of a slog, if I were to put it mildly. If we could go into that more in depth here in a minute, but I would say that the show, I don't know if the show so much rewarded us for sticking with it this whole time, because I don't feel like most of the plot threads for the first, especially the first season, more so with the second season, but I don't think I don't think most of the plot threads have paid off. I feel like a lot have just sort of been just shoved to the side. But I do feel like the show, it just kind of feels like a new show. And we can get into more of the technical aspects of why here in a minute. So I guess, so if we compare this to season 1, let's start with season 1 of Discovery. How do you feel like it is different from season 1 of Discovery? For those, because I feel like most of the people who started watching the show and dropped off from the show did so in season 1.
Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest thing is it slowed down and said we're going to be methodical in the story that we want to tell. Whereas the spoiler for folks that haven't seen season 1, the Terran Empire. When you get to that in season 1, I really felt like that could have been a season in itself, or maybe 4 or 5 episodes in itself, a little bit longer than what we got. The Klingon War is just dressing effectively. I don't feel like they really give it the time that it deserved, because that should have been they really should have spent more time on that. And it has ramifications in the season. I'm not trying to say that doesn't, and they play that better in season 2, which we'll get to that in a bit. But in season 1, when it's happening and things are popping off, you'd almost feel like it's not. It'd be like if someone were writing a novel around World War II, and they make no mention of it, but it's affecting the characters in the novel. Like you know it's affecting them in some ways, but they're not really talking about it. And you might seem weird to say that, but there are just episodes where it's like, did you forget that this thing's happening? But you want to go over here and tell this thing about Terran? Okay, that's cool. But why don't we? Okay. They didn't have a clean focus in my estimation.
Yeah, I would say that. Yes, I would agree with that, and I think if I were to rephrase that, I would say that it has to do with when you're telling a story, there are certain promises that you make to the viewers or the readers or the listeners, and regardless of what format that story is being made in, whether it's TV, movies, books, comics, what have you. As a writer, as a creator, you are making a set of promises to the consumer of the media, and you were saying that we're going to do X, Y, and Z thing, and that promise entails that there's going to be a payoff. So a really good example of this would be, and also of both how it works and how it fails, is Game of Thrones. So one of the things that Game of Thrones, their big promise that they essentially made to the people who watched and the people who read the books was, this is a very complicated, nuanced adult story, and simple things don't happen. Things are messy, and politics matters, and there is no simple or easy way out. Good people are going to do bad things. Bad people are going to do good things, and people will pay the price for the mistakes that they make. And they followed, and the reason why the show was so good for so long is that they adhered to those promises. And then in the final 2 seasons, after they started straying from the books, it's like they forgot these rules that they had outlined, and story things started to happen that we didn't understand why they were happening, and things that were paying off didn't feel like they paid off. Like
Like they hadn't been earned.
Yeah, like at the Night King, for instance, the death of the Night King and the battle at Winterfell. Like, that was a big situation where we have been told and set up and established so many things about what would happen, and then it's all sort of wrapped up in one really messy episode, and somebody who's not been even involved with that story arc is the one that concludes it. And it felt like a violation of a lot of those promises, because one of the other promises that the show made was that it was going to subvert expectations, but they would just subvert expectations just so that something would happen that you didn't expect. Mm-hmm. And that ended up not working, because ultimately the beauty of Game of Thrones was when you go back and you look at those things that happened that were unexpected, you realize, oh, well, they really weren't that unexpected. The reason they were unexpected is because it was different than what would happen in the genre, but within the promises and the setting of Game of Thrones, this is the logical conclusion of the story. And with season 7 and the final season, it just doesn't play out that way. And so to bring it back to Star Trek, I think that season 1 of Discovery is a lot of that. So you have 2 conflicting series of promises within the Star Trek universe. You've got the old TV shows. You've got particularly the Berman era TV shows from the 90s and the early 2000s, from TNG to Enterprise. And then you have the Abrams movies. And both of those give you a conflicting series of promises. Like, the Abrams movies are not introspective. They're fun action movies. They're popcorn movies. They're not very... They don't have a lot of depth. And also, the Federation that exists in them is not very recognizable to those people who have paid attention to the TV shows. And then the TV shows are ensemble cast shows. They have a very thought out Federation and world and setting. Everything is, although they could always go in more depth than they had, there was a fairly understood what is Starfleet, what is the galaxy, who are, the main bad guys, and what are the types of stories that they tell. And they're usually episodic ensemble stories. Yeah. And I feel like season 1 of this... Yeah.
One thing about the Federation being, like, because our big budget movies, when the Federation, someone in there being bad or someone doing a corrupt deal, that works, though, because you have the shows where you at least have seen a standard of Starfleet and the Federation. But when you jump to the Abrams verse and you haven't had that in a while, you hadn't had a TV on air in a couple years, and it's like those are some of the first stories you want, like in Into Darkness.
Into Darkness.
Yeah, and it's like,
yeah.
But we don't know this Federation, with the exception of the Academy, the time spent on the Academy.
Yeah, and I would say that the turn with Admiral Marcus in, like, Star Trek Into Darkness, him being bad, and the involvement of Section 31 in it, although for people who've not followed the show, the Section 31 bit might be a bit confusing, but I feel like Admiral Marcus makes a little bit of sense because we have Pike to juxtapose him with.
Oh, that's a good
so
point. Yeah.
We've got a good admiral, we've got a bad admiral, so you can play them off against each other. Section 31 seems a bit weird and comes kind of out of nowhere along with Khan, but everything else I feel like is pretty, like within the framework of the story that they were telling, it made enough sense that to go along with the conceit to have an action movie. But with Discovery, I feel like they kind of tried to have their cake and eat it too. They were like trying to be fun, dumb action movie, like Abrams. I don't want to call the Abrams movies dumb. I actually think that those movies are fairly smart for action movies, but they are not introspective, episodic, character-focused stories. They are plot-driven, shoot-'em-up popcorn movies, which are fine. I love those. And in particular, I really love the first and third of the Abrams first Trek movies. Just for the record. But
one moment, let me close my door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Folks, you'll appreciate that, because otherwise we're gonna get some laughing and cackling from the roommate doing their own thing.
But yeah, main thing is I think that the promises that were set up from typical Star Trek TV are mainly ensemble cast. I think that's sort of the biggest thing, because with an ensemble cast, regardless of whether it is episodic or serialized, because Star Trek previous to Discovery, unlike people have liked to say, Star Trek has done serialized stories in addition to episodic stories, particularly in DS9 and in Star Trek Enterprise. And they did heavy serialization in both of those series, which, for those who don't know, the difference is episodic is like self-contained stories. Serialized stories are ones where there's like an overarching season storyline that every episode hooks into. And so the main thing that makes or breaks a Star Trek show is the ensemble. If you are like hanging everything off of one character, that's got to be a really, really good character, and you've got to have a lot of meat and depth to them. But ultimately, I don't think that Star Trek works as a single point of view character sort of story. Like, you have to have an ensemble to play off of, because one of the most important things about Star Trek is the diversity of the cast and the diversity of the viewpoints that those characters bring, and the moral dilemmas and conflicts that come from those sharing the same space as each other. And I think that that's one of the reasons why season 1 is so weird, is they put so much focus on the Michael Burnham, and they don't have enough depth with all the other characters. They all just kind of feel like they're there. And I think on a basic level, Michael Burnham's story does not work, because they're like trying to repurpose T'Pol and Spock's stories. Like, they're trying to repurpose a Vulcan story and just tell it from a human perspective, and ultimately it doesn't really work. And that's actually one of the things I think that makes season 3 work so well, is they just completely got rid of that. They just threw it in the trash. They literally did away with it in a montage. It's fantastic.
To your point about the ensemble, when they try to bounce off of each other in season 1, there's like, who cares? It's like, I don't know who the Stamets is yet. I don't really know. I don't care about his relationship to Doctor yet. So when he's holding Hugh in his arms, because after Tyler's killed him, I'm kind of like, that's like, that probably should have been you killed the ship's doctor. That put Beverly Crusher in that moment, and we would lose our shit.
Well, but also, to another point, like, a lot of people still don't realize that Hugh isn't the chief medical officer of the Discovery. Right. He is just another doctor, because the ship has multiple doctors. Yeah. It's like, in another Trek show, that would be like people would really like have this stuff memorized. But yeah, it's like, you're right. Like, when things happen with the ensemble cast outside of Burnham, because everybody's filtered through Burnham's context, and because she is this walking paradox of a human filled with emotions who's just suppressing all of her emotions and being super Vulcan, but we also know that she's actually super emotional, but yet she's also making these hyper logical decisions and seems to not have, like, just this really self-contradictory nature that was not fully thought out and never fully fleshed out in a way that made sense. But because everybody is filtered through that lens, it makes it everyone really hard to like. I feel like a lot of people really attach themselves to certain characters on the show, particularly Tilly or Saru or Stamets, because they each have like one key defining feature that you could sort of latch onto, and also the actors who perform those characters are very good. Yeah. And that's honestly what got me to get through the show, was because I just really like the cast, even if the stories that they were given were just horrible.
Oh man!
So I guess going into season 2, well, I guess another thing is a sort of like structurally speaking, I guess to your point earlier, with like the way they split it between the Klingon War and the Mirror Universe in season 1. It kind of felt like schizophrenic, like they were really secretly building up to a quick like 4-episode arc in the Mirror Universe the whole time, so that it felt like they could never really dig into the Klingon universe, because if they dug in too much, we might like figure out what the mystery is before they told us there was even a mystery.
Yeah.
Because really, like the whole time, it's like, hey, what's up with this new captain on this ship? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? We don't know. And but it was always kind of like, no, he's kind of like a good guy, I guess. But he's just like thinks a little differently. I don't know. The show just
yeah.
I don't want to beat that dead horse too much. I wrote way too many articles about it. Plus, I actually, fun fact, before doing this, I went back and reread my whole article. It was on the site. It was titled "In Defense of Hating the Klingons' New Look." Because in case we forget, Discovery completely redesigned a alien species that we had spent 500 hours with, in almost every movie with, and they completely changed them for no reason. And they didn't do anything interesting with them.
Yeah, he didn't give him like 8 legs and a pincer or something like that. It's
well, so they did do a couple of things I liked. Like at least as far as lore goes, like they gave them basically extra sensory stuff to where, because they really were into, in season 1, they were really into the idea of like predator and prey species, and like, because like Saru species, the Kelpians were a prey species and the Klingons were a predator species, and they were really into this idea that like species would be like predator or prey, but like they never really did anything with that, with the stories
aside from Saru's on season 2, that's about the most, but it doesn't really translate past that, except for things that are happening versus captainship and things like that, but not
and it also gets into like kind of problematic tropes, in my opinion, with
what
by like setting an entire species of aliens to say that they can only be predator or only be prey, and it's like
we're getting into some Zootopia stuff.
That's some Zootopia stuff. It doesn't. Yeah, but I'm really glad they didn't go too far into that. But and then in season 2 they just changed the Klingons again, so they gave them wigs. So I guess we're cool now. So yeah, I guess going into season 2,
I had forgotten that happened. Having my brain trying to block it out.
Yeah, between season 1 to season 2, they just all grew hair, because apparently it was just the entire species of Klingons, who didn't all belong to the cult of Tukuvma, decided they were all going to shave their heads at once for some reason, and then they all grew it back later.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another thing with like the promises of the Klingons in season 1 that I really disliked. It was like, we're going to completely change things. We're going to be like really in depth. We're going to really think about the way these old school alien like species work. And there was a really interesting idea in that that you kind of see reflected in their costume design, is that the Klingons were actually multicultural. that different Klingons who grew up on different planets had different cultures. The different houses, and this is reflected in the way the different houses dressed and behaved. And I don't remember, but I feel like that even went so far as there were maybe some dialectic changes that happened with the Klingon language. If not, that would be a cool thing to do. But they never really like delve into that, and that would have been a really cool way to explain why these Klingons look different versus, say, TOS Klingons or TNG Klingons. But they never go into that. So yeah, just another sort of thing that didn't get followed up on, that got threw away.
I will say one other highlight though. I liked that I loved. Rainn Wilson as Mud. If there was a way to bring him back, and he's on any small capacity, a hollow deck episode, I don't care. But I felt like he did I enjoyed that episode quite a bit.
And that's one of the fun things, and this is sort of like, I guess, speaks to why I feel like season 2 and 3 have improved so much over season 1, is he and Jason Isaacs at the Star Trek convention a few years ago that I went to. It was like the season after season. It was like the one after season 1 had came out, and season 2 was sort of like in their break of principal photography. And they were going over, they were just sharing stories, because like these guys weren't going to be making another Star Trek episode, so they really didn't care who knew. They were spilling tea the whole time. And one of the things that they were both kind of got into is that it was a mess behind the scenes. Like Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, the second Harry Mudd episode, the really good one with the time travel gimmick and stuff.
Yeah.
That one was basically written Rainn Wilson had got the script for that. Then he showed up to film it, and the script was like did not exist. It had been completely like scrapped because it was bad. And they wrote that episode on set as they were filming it.
Wow.
Yeah, and they did that a lot in season 1 because they just because they had fired Brian Fuller after they had shot the first episode, or after they'd shot pieces of the first episode, but before they had filmed the second episode. And then after that, they sort of like had Kurtzman in there as the showrunner, but then they put in Gretchen Berg and Aaron Harberts. They were like the head writers, and then they eventually became the showrunners for season 2 before they were fired. And it just sort of like there was a really chaotic environment behind the scenes where things just weren't, I feel like, connecting, partly because they just were losing writers constantly. Writers would show up, they'd write an episode, and then they would leave. They didn't have a coherent writer's room, and they did not have coherent leadership throughout most of season 1. So, but yeah, going into season 2, let's see. I think they did benefit from a little bit more coherent structure, because even though after the 4th episode they did fire their showrunners for some behind the scenes inappropriate behavior, they got Kurtzman again, who was an experienced showrunner, so he kind of knew what he was doing, and he elevated Michelle Paradise, who was one of the writers in season 2, and they had a coherent writer's room throughout most of season 2, so they didn't have this same writer turnover during season 2 as they did during season 1. That's part of the reason why they got rid of the showrunners, is because they wanted to keep that together, because people were going to leave. And then going into that same writer's room goes into season 3 with Michelle Paradise, now one of their writers, as the showrunner. So what are your thoughts on like season 2, on how it improved?
Let's see. So we said this at the start, is that the character moments are fantastic. So one, I loved seeing Hugh and Stamets. This simultaneously the plot to how they get him back. I don't think about it too much. I'm just like, sure, because he got stuck into my sure, fine. But them having to process that out and figure out how they're going to put that relationship back together. Hugh doing with what am I? because he has a legitimate question of like, am I the same? He's dealing with that for a little bit. I actually kind of wish they dove into that a little bit more, but it's fine because but it's also fine. Loved Burnham and Spock's moments together. I also thought that started off a little rocky. I kind of wasn't sold on it yet, but as I continued to progress later into the season,
they also do the classic. Two heroes meet, they have to sort of fight each other, and then and then after they fight each other and go through their adversity, they then become fast allies, sort of deal.
Yeah. And then Saru, Burnham, and Pike just worked so well together as a trio. Their dynamics were just spot on from the moment the Anson Mount is in there. He's like his energy, charisma on the set. I'm like, that's what we needed from a captain, and I think it imparted a lot onto Burnham and Saru heading into season 3. Not to say they didn't need to copy him, but after having gone through Lorca, he gave them a steady hand of like, hey, I got this. Go do what you need to. Like, I'm gonna handle the ship, and obviously I'm still doing the way stuff. But like, go handle your aspects, and we're gonna the work as a trio was fantastic. So again, it's just the character interactions and moments were a lot better, and we actually find out what the other ensign and lieutenants and the bridge crew's names are. And
it was incredible.
Remember them.
Oh, these people who've been on the screen since the first episode, as far as I know, now have names, so that's great.
Oh God!
I did not know Detmer or I can't remember her full name. I didn't know their full names until then.
That's so bad.
I still don't really know the names of all the other principal casts but I at least they are enough of a fixture there now, and they're consistently there enough that I know that they're a part of the bridge crew when I see them. Yeah. So even if I don't know the character's name, I know the actor's face. That is an important aspect of Star Trek, I think, personally.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Philippa, because because again, I wasn't a big fan of the Terran twist. Again, if they were going to do it, spend time on it. But gosh, she was golden. I've talked so much about Anson Mount, but Philippa was fantastic. Didn't know she was going to push Burnham that much, or test her that much, or be such a thorn in the side of Section 31 as she was. And then you start to see, because you're also just concerned about her loyalty. It's like, what are you on about? Like, why do you want to be here? Like, you're trying to establish something else here, create your own rule. Like, I half expected her to take over Section 31 fully, and that be the thing that they move on to, which sport might be something still.
Well, I mean, yeah, she is still set to headline, and we knew it at that point that she was set to headline her own Star Trek Section 31 TV show. As far as we know, that's still in the works. I go back and forth on Giorgio in season 2. Season 1, I thought it was interesting because of certain character choices that they were making for Burnham. I thought she was interesting, but she was just sort of there. Then season 2, she was still there, and she was delightful. I very much enjoyed her performance, and I enjoyed the character, and she always seemed like she was having the most fun of everyone there, which was infectious. But from a character and a storytelling perspective, I didn't really see much of a point to her, because ultimately we had Tyler there to give us a point of view into Section 31, and I don't know, it felt like she was just sort of there most of the time.
And I think that might be a good distinction I should make. It's Michelle Yeoh's performance, like her scenery truing. I could watch that all day. But I think that's a really good point. As far as what did her character actually bring?
She kicked things, and that was really nice. But I mean, I think everything you're saying is true about season 2. I really liked it overall. I think that if you thought too much about anything that was happening with the season-long arc, it would just like hurt. But they also added a lot of great cast members, either on recurring roles or as just a role for that season. Like, I did not think I would like having Spock in there, and I did not think I would like having Pike in there, but they really helped provide this is the main thing I think that's why season 2 was so much improved over season 1, is that they actually had an understanding of what the Federation was and what the Star Trek universe was, and they grounded it more with having the presence of Pike and Spock there. And my other favorite addition to the show, Jet Reno.
Signataro.
Oh, she's so good. And
she just gets under Stamets' nerves.
Yeah, and like in the first episode, she shows up. Like, she's dry, she's sardonic, she's hilarious. But ultimately, like, she has a heart of gold. She is there. She's hyper competent, and she's there to help people. And having her and Pike there just sort of reinforced the idea of that Starfleet is actually here to help people. And I feel like we needed that, both like as an audience, but also just from a storytelling perspective, to ground it from season 1, which is so dark and directionless, that it really helped ground the show and ground what Discovery could be. And I think that helped as a result. Also, they won a lot of goodwill from fans by bringing back Hugh, because he was a very well-liked character. And I know one of the things at the Star Trek convention during that period between season 1 and season 2, a lot of fans who were either gay, or for those who had gay children, they were very upset by him getting killed in season 1, because that was the first like real gay couple that they had on Star Trek, and was very important. And to follow into the bury the gays trope, they really like messed a lot of them up. And that was one of the things at the convention that were very clear, like, we're gonna fix it. And they did. And I think that won them a lot of goodwill with fans too. And it was just also like, I frankly didn't care how they brought him back. I just like wanted him back. I really like Wilson Cruz.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's.
I swear he's like the mother on the ship sometimes. I'm being like, God, would you just don't do that? Don't This is why you shouldn't do that. That's too dangerous to. Is anyone gonna listen?
I hadn't even considered that until now, but you're right. Like, they even do a whole episode in season 3 where he's basically being like the den mother to everybody on the ship.
As soon as that started happening on the episode, I was like, "Oh, this fits." Yeah, because he would do that.
That checks out. So I guess. Here's another interesting comparison. So without going too deep into it, let's think about Discovery season 3 in comparison to Picard.
Ooh. This is a setup, isn't it? You're going to get me in trouble with everybody.
I know, because I think you hated Picard more than I did.
Oh, I
actually kind of liked it, but for weird reasons.
Okay, to be fair to Picard, when it's focused on him, and I know you're just like, how's it not focused on? I was like, yeah, but there's his parts of the storyline I have tended to enjoy. Well, I felt like some of the stuff early on to get him to get him motivated to get off his ass and do something. I'm not saying he was lazy by any means, but he's definitely in a place of hurt and rejection from what had happened on Mars and with the I was about to say androids. It's like,
the synths.
God, we don't always have to have another name for things.
I don't know why they just didn't call them androids. Like, Data was called an android the entire series. We did not need, like, unless synthetic human was supposed to like bring in the idea of hollows being intelligent beings, sentient beings, but they didn't do that. So
Yeah.
I think that just having the term synth was just a bad idea.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't need another term. Just pump the brakes.
It was confusing.
Yeah. So his moments were great. The Riker family episode, I enjoyed that a lot. But once they got to the synth planet, they really lost me, because there's things just start happening. I forget what her sister or sister's name is on the planet, but I'm like, all of a sudden she's like, that I'm gonna do this. And I'm like, but why? Why did you kill? Obviously, I know what they're trying to tell me.
Yeah,
it happened, but I don't know why I should care this late into because it's 2 episodes. This is literally like the last 2 episodes, and she's going on this. Now I don't want to say rampage. That's a little much. But she's like, yes, open up the portal and bring our AI gods to wreak havoc and revenge across humanity. And I'm like, wow, we've gotten off the rails. And then the Borg cube. I don't know if I can ever forgive them for what they did to Hugh. That upset me so much. Because I was like, I want to see him in a future season, like continue to have this conversation about reforming the Borg and integrating them back into, like, that's amazing. Actually, no, that might have been where the sinking in my stomach happened, and then once they got to the synth planet, I didn't care anymore. And then the whole CGI shot of the Federation showing up at the last minute, it just looked like piss, like I just. Look, we get a bunch of CGI shots of the new Federation ships that look way better in the protected cloaked sphere in season 3 of Discovery. But sorry. And then the Riker's gonna try to stuff back into a uniform back. Sorry, that just. And then
what was also clearly the set of the Discovery Bridge, just turned 25 degrees, so that there was a different console behind them.
So there's some interesting ideas on the idea of synthetic life. I just don't know if they're actually interested in because when he died, I was starting to get out of it. The totem or the golem, that for Picard's body, and that, like, again, you did at least establish it, so it didn't come out of nowhere. But now you've almost got a Khan's blood on your hands, which you got to really be careful when you introduce a mechanic like that. Which is another thing I'm a little worried about, because what's to stop them from just making another one? And like you might have figured out immortality here to a degree. So
yeah,
I'll stop.
I would say so. I guess my main takeaway. So I think that the key thing I think Discovery or Picard did well, that Discovery up until this point had not been doing well, and the key takeaway of the thing that Picard failed at that I think has made season 3 of Discovery succeed. So one, the thing that they did well is world building. I personally think a lot of fans were very upset with the way that the Federation post Hobus star explosion reacted to the Romulan diaspora, and the way that they that really just the world was set up. A lot of people felt like it was it was darker, it was dystopian, and all this stuff, and that they felt like the Federation was not consistent in Picard the way as it was depicted in the Berman era Trek. And I would agree that it was different, but that was intentional. I think that the story that they were trying to tell was one of which you have to actively fight to preserve utopia. You don't attain utopia and stay there. Right. You have to actively continue to participate to continue utopia existing. And that actually, I think, is consistent with the story, particularly of Deep Space Nine, but also the later seasons of TNG. That's a theme that they constantly revisit. It's in the Pale Moonlight with where the famous Cisco Deep Space Nine episode where he assassinates a Romulan ambassador so that he can draw the Romulans into the Dominion War, and he talks about how he thinks he can live with it. That's the whole crux of that argument: is how can I, as a Federation captain, do these objectively bad things, and like live with it? How can I do that? And that is a conversation I feel like that Picard sets up, but does not like do anything with, because I think in the thing that they do bad is that the show is thematically confused. They have multiple themes that they start that they never really keep consistent throughout the show. So they do really good establishing the world, establishing the post-Hobus star like Federation and the way it works and the way normal people live who don't exist within Starfleet. But they do a very bad job with thematically hooking you to any of this. It's like every other episode they're coming up with a new theme and they're not linking anything back to anything that they've previously established. And by the end of it, I'm dealing with some like super AI gods that the Romulans have known about for thousands of years, and that's why for some reason they've never had AI, but didn't they have smart computers? Like they have space flight? What is happening? and so they don't do anything with it. And I think that's what Discovery season 3 has done that's really made it better than Picard and the other two. They do a very good job of establishing the Federation in this new post-burn reality, which we can get into the burn here in a minute. But this new post-burn reality, what is the Federation like? What is the Alpha Quadrant like? What is it like for normal people to live in this place? What is it like for Starfleet to live in this place? What is it like for other aliens to live in this place? Like, we get all of these perspectives, and at the same time, they are linking it back to a central theme of post-traumatic growth that they're constantly talking about. How can someone live and survive and thrive after a traumatic event has happened? And that's like been the central theme of the entire season. They've had one theme that they've gone back
see how
to
various
every episode.
planets have dealt with it. Yeah,
it's great. It's so good.
Super solid. Because
season 3. I guess. What's your highlights?
Season 3. So I've been enjoying Burnham and Book. So just me personally having a black couple on television in sci-fi. That's the other, like, I don't get a lot of that. So part of me is sharing, and I knew they were like from the first episode this season. I'm like, okay, that's gonna be it. That's gonna.
Yeah, like clearly. Yeah. I mean, have we seen him? Like,
it's like a big.
I mean, it's like a young Idris Elba. I mean, come on.
It's just like rewind the clock on Idris Elba a couple years, like 10 years, and it's like, yeah, there you go. So that's been great. That's been great to watch them, that budding relationship, and Adira, which was also quite a surprise as an addition, and did not expect that. The Trill storyline was really good, and that's also helped build forging future relationships for the galaxy outside of that, and for the Trill as well. Like that's. Trying to think what else. To add on to that, her and Stamets relationship as well has also been a fun one to watch, because I'm like, yeah, you two, it's not just their science, but it's like you're both awkward. And your intelligence.
They're both kind of the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like one's in a different place in their life with dealing with that, but yeah, they're the same. They're the same person. So like that. So of course you'd hit it off so well. Saru's growth in this, because he's got it. He occasionally still has those nervous bouts come up every once in a while, but like Saru's got it. He's like, I can handle this. I'm more just upset at Burnham for the decisions you've made. But I've got this. And when he's shopping around his crew about what he should say for his make it so, I'm like, I keep saying like that's this person, but I think that's the thing that helps validate what happened in season 2 is that now when we get into season 3 and they're doing things, I can finally say, of course you would do that. I feel very comfortable making this statement. Of course Saru would do that. Of course he would ask, execute. And everyone looks around and is like, that ain't it. That ain't it. Yeah. And even he knows it. He's like, yeah, we'll go back to the drawing board. Tilly, let's keep working on that. So yeah, I feel like now we're just seeing moment after moment pop and just been put together so well for everyone that gets their little bit of screen time. Like Reno coming in again, guesting every so often at critical moments, especially when they're like trying to fix the ship when it first comes in.
It's the most recent episode. Stamets like yelled at her to do something, and he's like, "What do you?" And she's like, "What do you think I'm doing?"
It almost also explains when she's not on the show, too. I think it also helps in that way. It's like she probably is actually.
She's probably working. Oh, she's so good. But yeah, I really think that they've drawn together an ensemble. They have decided to link. Like, Burnham is still thematically central. Like, she's still definitely the main character, but she's no longer, I would say, the point of view character. She's no longer the sole one that we are seeing the world through and experiencing the world through. Like, we are getting to live in everyone's pocket of their various lives, including the new characters that they have been adding to the show. They have really leaned into the central theme, like having an actual central theme instead of just having a plot that they're hanging everything onto. This season's felt like way more episodic. Like, although we have had, this central question, like what happened to the Federation, what is the burn? I find myself thinking that once we eventually get a full reckoning of what the burn is, it's not going to be as important because so this sort of will lead into another question about, is Discovery season 3 a repudiation of, say, the JJ version of Star Trek? But I will say that one of the things that Abrams is really known for, and of course Kurtzman, the executive producer of the show, co-wrote 2 of the 3 Abrams Star Treks. He has co-written a lot of movies. He's a part of that Bad Robot circle of creators. But one of the big things is the idea of the mystery box. You have a central mystery and you got to sort of lead it through, and you do the thing and you answer it, and inevitably the answer is never going to be as interesting or as important as the fact that you posed the question to begin with. I think what's his name, the captain, Jason Isaacs in season 1, Lorca. Yeah. The whole mystery behind him was not really important, and also kind of a bad answer, arguably, depending on how you felt about the mirror universe stuff. But I think that with the burn, it's not really going to be as important, because I think that what has happened is the idea of the burn has set up a framework through which they can ask questions and tie it back to the central theme, because every episode just has been fairly episodic, and it's been fairly traditional. Going through and watching this season, it has felt a lot like, I think if I were to compare it to any other prior season of any Star Trek show, it has felt the most like season 3 of Star Trek Enterprise. And the reason I say that is that had a very strong serialized narrative in the Xindi Expanse, the Xindi War storyline. And you also have but a very strong thematic narrative choices in what happens when these idealistic people go through a traumatic experience. And because this is and for context, that storyline came out in 2003, a couple of years after 9/11. It was one of the first post 9/11 stories that had been written that was what happens to our traditional American idealistic, neo-colonial society, although they wouldn't phrase it that way in Star Trek, but what happens to us after a traumatic event like this. Like, how can we maintain our ideals in the face of terrorism? And they link it back through that the whole season. And it's a very big deal. And it concludes, I think, fairly well. But this season has reminded me a lot of that, because it's been like every few episodes you'll have like one that's really burn focused, but then most of the time they're like, the burn is like the B plot, and then they'll have a episodic A part that links back to the central theme, but is not explicitly about the burn or trying to solve that mystery.
Yeah, and I think it's the contrast of season 2. Once you really start to figure out once the Red Angel started showing up, it's like, and that's what we're on about. And while there were a couple of, like, to me, the thing to stand out for me was like Saru's planet when they go back there, like, and that kind of being that combination of the A plot, B plot happening. Like, I felt like that was a great example of what's happening here. But theirs was like almost like a rush, or like there was a timer of like we gotta keep the pressure on for the audience as we're watching this. And I'm just like, I don't know if you need that. Here it's, the burn is important, and as Burnham says in her own words, I don't think the Federation can be whole until we find out the source of the burn. But the universe is still crap, so figuring it out, at least, and this is what I was a little worried about at the start of the season. I don't feel it as much, but I'm like, please don't have some kind of malarkey kind of fix that like makes the other dilithium changes it from being inert, or like don't do that. Like, yeah, you need to investigate.
Don't give me a MacGuffin that I've got to hunt.
It's like the resolution should be like, how are we going to continue to help rebuild the Federation, extend our help and our support as we're in a fragile state, but not that, by finding him now that's the linchpin to getting more dilithium or something, like whatever, because that would be very dissatisfying. I can handle the reveal of it not being that like that wowing or impactful, going like, back to your,
it was the Omega particle all along. Junk.
Yeah. And they teased it in this most recent episode, so we haven't gotten the confirmation exactly what has happened, but we kind of got a good feeling that some reaction has happened there with the other Kelpian that's living there. But yeah, we'll find out very soon.
Yeah, we don't know what it is, but I already know that the answer is probably going to be somewhat disappointing. But I don't particularly care, because, like I was saying, the burn has just sort of been a framework for them to discuss and play around with this new galaxy, this new timeline that they're in. But really the stories have been about, like, how do you prosper after a traumatic event, because all the crew went through this traumatic event of having gone through, jumped 1,000 years in the future. All of their family are dead. They're never going to be able to go home. All the homes that they could go back to are all different. Yeah. Nothing's going to be the same for them. The Federation no longer exists as far as compared to what they knew. So all they have are themselves, and they've got to learn how to live with it. And also, so does everybody else in the galaxy. Like, all the new characters that they meet are all having to deal with something like that. You've got Adira, they lost their boyfriend. Yes, they lost their, I couldn't remember if they were married or not, but yeah. They lost their boyfriend. They ended up having to get a Trill symbiote added to them in emergency, as a result losing a lot of their memories, and then having to sort of deal with everything that relates to that. You have, what is the Andorian's name?
Crap. Because he was with Book on the
he was with Book
on the salvage planet.
Anyways, he's had his antenna cut off, and he's having to deal with being alienated from his own species and his own people who are now part of the Emerald Chain, and having to deal with I'm with these humans with the Federation, my sworn enemies. How am I going to like survive and integrate into this new scenario? And then you have Book, where similar situation. He's in exile from his own people because he has the ability to like connect with, animals, and because he's a space druid, which is like just my favorite thing. He's a space druid, and it's awesome. And he just wants to like protect animals, and it's great.
Yeah.
and he's having to deal with like, how am I gonna be this like this drifter, and like trying to like be with these goody two shoes Federation people, and also the Federation is dealing with it too. Like, how can they uphold their ideals when there's like 5 ships and they've got to try to protect the whole galaxy?
To your point earlier in season 2 about Pike and Spock, I feel like you were saying that them having given us a better view of what the Federation is and how that works before we get to season 3 was a great piece to have. So we have something in our mind, something recently in our minds to compare with. And then again, we're kind of seeing different leadership styles. Was it Admiral Vance?
Yes.
And also, I love that Odin Farrer gets to play him.
Oh, so good. So happy about him being cast. He's so good at just having the gravitas. Like, you feel like he has been stuck with this mantle of leadership that is like slowly crushing him. But he knows that he's the only one that can handle it, and he has to deal with this burden. And no one else gets it, except for, I think he thinks Saru gets it. Because, like, Saru is like, he, like everybody else, I feel like has already grown up in this post-burn reality. And because Saru, is from, the 23rd century, he understands what the Federation has been and what it can't be again. And so it feels like he can connect with Saru in that way. But even still, he's not sure that Saru has like the bones to make it. Like, if Saru was put in command, he's like not sure if he could really make the tough choices or if he could even make the right choice.
And there's that trust issue
been
there
real good.
too, because that episode, I found myself like just having a visceral reaction and being upset at Admiral Vance, because I'm like, now come on, man, they're here, it's time to roll. And then it set in. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't trust them either.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is brilliant. She actually got me siding with the Federation brass for once, because usually that's not how that.
Yeah, usually it's always like they're just a bunch of dicks, and they're either evil, incompetent, or a bunch of dicks. We have had like 2 good admirals in the whole of Star Trek, and the rest have just sucked. They sucked so hard. And they're regularly the antagonists, and Vance is, and especially because I really liked Star Trek Enterprise, and although the temporal Cold War storyline kind of sucked, knowing that has happened already in this universe, and like knowing all of the insane hijinks that probably would have entailed, having a ship from the 23rd century that you've never heard of, that's been reported destroyed, that apparently had an experimental instantaneous like drive powered by space mushrooms that can solve immediately all of your logistical problems.
And it's carrying an ancient AI that's
oh yeah, with a computer that has been interfaced with a thousands of year old alien intelligence. Yeah, let's add that to it too.
It sounds a little ridiculous when we say it out loud.
And with an emperor from the Mirror Universe on it to boot.
Yeah.
Just to have. Also, I really love that David Cronenberg has been in 2 episodes of this show.
Hoping he's
like,
been a few more.
Oh God, it's so good. He is. He said he's gonna be. They've already asked him to be back for the next season, but I feel like they were like, oh, damn it, The Mandalorian has Werner Herzog. We need another famous old director who can be in the show. Oh, hey, we shoot this in Toronto. Cronenberg. We can get Cronenberg. But really, like, I've been thinking about this. Having Cronenberg on like Discovery is kind of crazy, not just because like he's a fairly famous director, but also it's like it would almost be like if J.J. Abrams had cast Steven Spielberg to be a guest star in one of his shows. Like
Yeah.
Cronenberg has had a fairly direct influence on like Star Trek as a series forever, like at least since the first season of TNG, because like I mean, obviously he had already started doing a lot of his horror earlier in the 80s, but like a lot of the conception of a lot of the things that happen in TNG, especially the early seasons, are like very Cronenberg inspired, like specifically his body horror and stuff like that. Like they had like phaser shots where you would vaporize somebody and it would like burn the skin away, and then you would see the muscle and it would burn the muscle away, and then you would have the skeleton and it would turn the skeleton to ash. Or like
It's like, why did we?
yeah, or like the episode with the space worms where there's like that they infested, you know, our Starfleet, and they've got like the bulges coming out of their necks, and they blow the hole in him and he explodes, and they've got like this alien coming out of his neck stump, like just crazy shit. Like so. Anyways, I really like the fact that Cronenberg's on this show. So, I guess
before you go to that,
yeah. Anything else you want to say about season 3 before I go into a couple of more questions?
So I know we pegged at it as far as like, or a joke was like, oh, it feels like Andromeda.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's like there are some elements of that, and I think probably by about the second or third episodes when they go back to Earth and figure out that it's no longer under the Federation, it takes everyone like, we're like, what? And then Saru and Burnham are definitely have crafted these relationships that I'm hoping like. And actually, let's go back to the burn solution real quick. So again, don't want that to be solution. And by the end of the season, if everyone's all of a sudden at the table getting ready to sign some accords, I'm like, no, slow down. You set the seeds. You set the seeds in Vulcan and be able to work with the Vulcans and Romulans. Okay, cool. You set the seed. Like, cool. Now pay those off later. They don't necessarily need, or maybe one of them pays off. You know, if one planet comes by to like, hey, we were impressed with what you've done or what you did, like, and we want to rejoin. Like, cool. That and being like that step towards the future. But if they, I just have this like gut feeling that still been trying to squash down, and it's at like 5% now. It was higher in the beginning of the season, but it's been much lower. That they're gonna try to jump too far. I'm like,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, you know, they only, I guess, spoilers for the latest episode, but they only found a planet made out of dilithium that could solve all of their dilithium problems, right?
Yeah. You know what? I will say this: if that's the one bad plot device, though, compared to what we've gotten this season, I will be okay. I think I just don't want to see it spiral out of control.
Yeah. If this season one, if this feels like a season 1, if I'm honest, but if this like season can do the job of establishing like this new universe and these new rules, then the next season can be about actually trying to rebuild the Federation with these new resources. Like, okay, we actually do have like all the dilithium, but because we're the Federation, you know, we're not gonna like hold this over you. We're gonna like, you know, do the good right thing or whatever. But that's going to end up presenting a lot of problems because ultimately they don't have the ships and the capability or the infrastructure to exploit, you know, a planet made out of dilithium. So they're going to have issues having to deal with that. And even if they do that, like the well has been so poisoned from 120 years of the Federation not existing that I don't think that there's an easy solve. I don't think even if they do have a planet full of dilithium and they find out that technically they aren't responsible for the burn, I don't think that that's going to be enough for them to get back all of these people. Yeah. Like, they might be able to get back Earth and Vulcan, but like, what about Andoria? Like, you know, what about the Klingons and right now? Like, what are the Klingons doing? What are the Romulans doing? Does the Dominion exist? What about the Borg? Like, there's so many like potential threats and potential allies that exist in this universe right now that we have not even had a glimpse of yet. That I'm really excited to see them re-explore, particularly the Klingons, since they have figured so prominently in Discovery. I really want to see what they do with them. I want to see if they follow up with, because they have been following up slowly but surely on a lot of these plot threads from season 1. And I kind of want to see if they do follow up on this idea of like a multicultural Klingon empire. And, you know, the Klingons were at this point supposed to have become a part of the Federation at a certain point. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? What is a post-Federation Klingon empire? If it's even an empire, what does that look like? There's just a lot of like really interesting storytelling potential that I really want to see them explore, that like beyond the burn, beyond the basics. I just there's a lot of world building stuff that you can do that's really cool.
I hope they continue to think that's cool.
I know. I hope they don't get shunted to like the 24th century or something, or another galaxy. I want them to actually stay here. I really like this setting. I want to know how programmable matter actually works and like all the cool shit you can do with it.
They detach nacelles almost for me for a loop there for a second.
Yeah, I know. At first, when they were talking about that, I was like, "This is really fucking dumb. I don't like this. Why do they have to be detached? We're just doing that because it's future, right? That's what we're doing."
Because I did
right?
I almost like grabbed the remote. I was like, or if I had a spray bottle, I was like, no.
But like, it might kind of make sense because like you got to think about it. One of the main things in Star Trek ships is like the EPS conduits, plasma, the warp plasma. You've got a feedback situation where like the ship gets hit from a blast, it causes energy stuff that happens. The electricity excites the warp plasma, and then things explode. So a lot of times in Star Trek, when things are exploding, it has to do with the fact that plasma is running through all their conduits, because that's smart. And and so and I've noticed that when they go to warp, the cells, the warp nacelles reattach, but when they're out of warp, they detach. So maybe that was like a safety thing that they did because they couldn't figure out how to do the warp plasma thing, warp without it. So they were like, well, maybe if they're just not physically attached to the ship, if one of them explodes, it doesn't blow up the ship. I don't know.
No,
random thoughts. Plus they could probably just regrow a nacelle if they needed to. I mean, the matter's programmable.
Holy shit!
Right?
It would take time, but yeah.
Yeah, but like, what if they could? Like, I don't know. Anyways, there's just stuff that they haven't done with it that I'm just really, really want them to do. So I guess, do you have anything more you want to say about
season 3? Some other stuff might come up in another episode, but I think that's all.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely want to do like more specific like episode highlights. Particularly, I want to do one about the episode where they go to Trill, because I think that's just an absolute standout episode. Like, instantly might be one of the top 10 best Star Trek episodes to have come.
The dinner also happens in that episode, right?
Yes.
So
good.
Yeah.
The episode's just fantastic all around. Just it's really, really good. Even if people don't watch Discovery, they need to see that episode because it's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess, so one of the things I was asking earlier is like, so is this season like a repudiation of the JJ Star Trek, and if not, what is it exactly? This might be a trick question.
It might be, because when I think about repudiation, Star Wars immediately comes to mind as far as Abrams and Rian Johnson, that cat fight
Mm-hmm.
effectively happened back and forth, and there's still people that are like, "That's not what happened." I'm like, "Yes,
I mean, I watched the movies; it clearly happened.
It's like I don't know, what are you watching that you don't see them making these and like even in the script, there's these jabs back at like, oh, that Holden, that's a 1 in a million. Like, that's a jab. So as far as in repudiation in that way, I don't feel like it's a direct repudiation, but indirect. Oh yeah, I would definitely agree that it's indirect in that it's showing that we can have some great action-packed episodes. Because what's the when not books actually not on the he's arguing with his brother, and Detmer's flying the ship and said, "That's a great action set piece for a Star Wars TV show." I'm going to put the movies aside for a second. But that's a great set piece for a
Discovery basically has their own Millennium Falcon, and it's got wood grain in it.
It's very beautiful, very beautiful.
I fucking love that ship. It's so good. But I did not think Star Trek has been trying for so long to create a Han Solo and a Millennium Falcon that fits inside this universe, and they finally did it. They finally did it. They did it in a way that I don't hate, that I actually love, and I'm so happy about it. I mean, the ship's really cool. It transforms.
He's like, yeah, it'll be fine. Like this most recent episode, it's like, yeah, it'll be tight, but that's fine. The ship transforms.
Right. It's great. I love it. I love it so much. And like the scene where they're like on the Emerald Chain prison, and like the ship comes through sideways between two buildings. Oh, so cool. Anyways, continue.
Also, we could talk about cinematography maybe another time, but the show's just continue to get more and more amazing to look at. I think you were talking on Twitter about someone was noticing the symmetry between Philippa and Burnham's walk through the desert in the first season, and then seeing him in the snow to wrap up the Terran episodes this most recent season, and I'm like, yes, she's like, yeah, it's almost like it's almost like
they're mirrors of each other. Yeah, so good. I think it's an indirect call out that yes, we can have brainy and thoughtful Trek, and it may not feel like exactly like the Trek of old. It's like, but we are trying to have conversation. We are trying to do something that's going to spur, like, get your gray matter going again. We're going to have some really great character-driven moments, and it doesn't have to all be spectacle, but we can deliver that in spades when we want to. And I'm actually really excited to see what happens in this next episode after the Discovery's been captured. Probably going to queue up to be a good action-heavy episode. That's going to be really cool. And to your point, like with season 2, when they had these like A plot, B plot, more episodic episodes, I'm thinking in particular of their first Prime Directive episode, where they have to go down, and it's the church that's been taken from a planet by the Red Angel, and it's like, which I don't think they ever explained how the Red Angel did that, and how that was also Burnham. I think there's a giant plot hole you can fly a Red Angel through, but or maybe they did. I don't know. It's not important. But anyways, that episode, it was like a standard like Star Trek plot, but they don't give us any time to breathe. It is like it's on a timer. It's like constantly going. Each shot is cut almost every 2 to 3 seconds. Mm-hmm. So like 2 to 3 seconds, they're switching to another shot. They're not sticking with the same static shots. They're not. They're moving very fast. They're cutting very fast. They're doing a lot of crazy stuff with their camera work. Nothing's ever shot standard. Things are like Dutch angles, or they're like constantly spinning the camera, or they're always doing stuff that keeps it in motion. And this season, they have just cut that shit out. Like, that is not happening. They are doing much longer cuts. than they did. They are still doing some fun stuff with like moving the camera. Like they've had some episodes where like the cameras drop through the deck of the ship, and then it turns out it's upside down, and it pivots back to where it's actually the right way. Like they're doing cool stuff that like Abrams like innovated on with the movies. So they are still borrowing a lot of Abrams' cinematic language, but they aren't borrowing sort of the plot strictures of that. I think they are throwing back more to late 90s Trek, which I prefer. So yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think it's a direct repudiation. Like I said, it's sort of a trick question. I don't think it's a direct repudiation because that would repudiate Kurtzman, who like is the executive producer. So because like he wrote those movies. So with Abrams,
it's like, are y'all calling me out? It's like, what?
What? No way! I would never do that. So no, like I don't think that they're directly doing it, but they are. I think they're finding a happy medium place. Like they're showing that you can innovate with Star Trek. You can change the way Star Trek looks. You can make it look more modern. But like ultimately, there is a tried and true formula for Star Trek, just like with anything else. Like you can still innovate on that formula and what that looks like, but ultimately, like it's an ensemble show, and you have to have it has to be a meteor show. It can't be all action all the time. So, and I guess this can be a broad question if we want it to be, but last question I have for you. How do you think Discovery Season 3 compares, generally speaking, to other genre sci-fi or fantasy like The Mandalorian or The Expanse?
So haven't seen Expanse. Just started season 1, so I'm like catching up on that. So I probably won't use that as best comparison. So I probably think about Mando. Westworld probably pops to mind a little bit. And, so let's see. If I were gonna use like Westworld for example, they not saying that Westworld has a mystery box problem, but there is always this conceit of each season of like what's gonna happen, like what's the next step in this AI evolution and/or revolution, which they continuously progressing forward in each season. There's a lot of conversations about AI that happen to it, but I would say like if I had to boil it down, it's like how are these lives starting and what are they going to do? And if they choose to play off of our Western preconceived notions of like, well, they're always going to come and kill us. And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe not if you're not a dick. But watch Westworld, you'll know what you'll get to season 3, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And then like there's a visible production value difference, but not in a. I guess I'm not trying to say like in a bad way, but some things just feel a little more polished if we're gonna pick like Mandalorian and Westworld, and that might be because of the tech that Mandalorian is using. They've got that NVIDIA projection screen that's like cutting time. So like when they're doing CGI shots, that's all. Sometimes that's all the thing they have to do. They don't also have to throw some CGI in the background. And I think something that's helped Discovery also in this season as well is like and it's not saying they never had on location shots in the other ones, but the first couple episodes, and again back in that we talked about a snow planet shot to start the Terran 2-parter. It's like that's really great. That helps really ground you back into these different worlds and stuff that they're visiting. Aside from the fact that we're also going to be on a ship for the most of the time, so like whenever we can get back onto actual Earth, I think that helps out a whole lot. So I think that's what can help it get closer to looking like those Westworlds and Mando. But the thing that also helps them is you got Jonathan Nolan, Lisa Joy on that, and then you got Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and their eyes on that. So I think it's just like a cinematography eye difference that I pick up on immediately. I mean, their stories are going to be different. Those are things they want to tell. So I'm glad for where it's at now. But those are just the technical things that pop out to me right immediately.
Yeah, I feel like with those two shows in particular, and The Expanse to a lesser extent, I think that The Expanse and Discovery's visual language is much more similar, but The Expanse hews closer to, say, Westworld in its narrative structure, but but then The Mandalorian, I think, hews closer to this Discovery in its narrative structure a bit more. But cinematography wise, production quality wise, you're talking about those other shows have just higher, aside from just a higher budget, those are now sort of set up and conceived with like movie quality production in mind. Like I don't know if they ever thought about releasing The Mandalorian like in theaters, but I know that initially when they first started talking about doing a Star Wars live action TV show, like back in the like right after episode 3, and they had like some Boba Fett show or some 1313 show
Yeah.
episodes written or whatever, that was the reason why they didn't go forward with it, is because they were like, if we're going to do this, it needs to be visually speaking the same sort of thing. It can't look cheap. It's got to look like movie Star Wars. And yeah, technology has finally caught up to where I think it's affordable. And that's been one of my gripes, honestly, about The Mandalorian, is so much of it has felt like it's just been a proof of concept for a Star Wars, like a more grand Star Wars TV show. It's felt like if we can do a limited scope TV show with just like a handful of characters, so we can reduce our budgets on however many creatures we do each week and however many locations we do, if we can figure out a way to do that and, you know, make it smaller, just a small scope Star Wars, and we can like work that out, then at that point we can math out what our budgets are going to look like when we do the bigger shows.
Yeah.
Like that's what it's felt like for the last 2 seasons.
So I had not articulated it like that, but that speaks to an issue I've had with fans that want to see this thing go 6 to 8 seasons. And I'm like, why? What's there that you want to see that long? And I get that some of the chapters are short. It's only 8
I mean,
per
yeah,
season.
Star Wars. I like the wars.
It's like, go take a 20 and go see a Star Wars. It's okay. But yeah, I think that can make, like, even though, yeah, I hadn't articulated it like that, but that hits some things I've been feeling about Mandalorian.
But yeah, but I think that like ultimately those are like much grander products. So I do think that, and like one of the things, I was reading an interview with Cronenberg in like Vanity Fair or something, and they asked him, you know, hey, you know, you're a famous director, are you going to direct Discovery? And he was talking about the process, and essentially, whereas, and they haven't gone as much in depth. I've watched some of the documentaries about The Mandalorian and watched behind the scenes stuff about Westworld, but those are filmed more like movies than they are like TV shows. Whereas Discovery very much is run and produced and manufactured like a TV show. They bring in TV directors. That are known for doing, you know, fun, creative things, but ultimately staying within the show style. You know, being able to film a show quickly and rapidly and competently without really even having seen other episodes of the show. Maybe they're not involved with the edit. They don't get involved with the ADR work that needs to be done after the fact. They're shot like TV shows, and even though they are written like more like a serialized, you know, modern TV show would be, they're still kind of filmed in a lot of ways like they used to be, which is why, you know, they can bring in Jonathan Frakes and it's fine. He's able to do more fun, cool stuff that he could not do when he was directing like an episode of Enterprise or when he directs like Leverage, but he and that's not a slight at Leverage, but like,
no, sorry.
You know,
also,
it's
my brain
like,
was like, yeah, he has been shooting, he's been doing other TV, yeah.
Like Leverage, The Librarians, like he does everything.
Get that TNT money, baby.
I know he does. Well, he's got the
he's got the
TBS money, or TBS, TNT, whatever. He's got TNG money, but like, I mean, come on, man's got to eat. But yeah, it's, so they're able to bring them in, and that's cool. But functionally, as far as cinematic goes, it's still fairly TV show,
Yeah.
even though they do have like fairly, really, really good, fully developed sets, which are nice. But yeah, I do think as far as storylines go, though, things like, say, The Mandalorian, I feel like don't have as much depth as Discovery does. But that's also partly what they're going for. A show like The Mandalorian is going more for a very specific, almost old school sort of episodic vibe, whereas Discovery is going for a more like we were talking about, that fusion between like a J.J. Abrams movie and old school Trek, versus a show like The Expanse, which, although has similar production values as Discovery, is very serialized. Like there is no deviation because, of course, they're based off books.
Yeah.
And so it's very much like Westworld in that way. Like with Westworld or The Expanse, you're watching like a television novel essentially, whereas Discovery is functionally a TV show.
Yeah. The other cinematography thing that popped in my head as we were talking is that I can't, and to prove your TV point as well, is that I can't think of an episode of Discovery that makes me immediately think of a director's style. But we have had that conversation multiple times about Mando, of like, oh, that's Akira Kurosawa. And then if I can do Akira Kurosawa again with Westworld, because they've had when you get to Shogun World, they did that multiple times of like, we're going to play in that style. And then in season 3, they had that, what's the name of the drug that he takes? He takes some drug in the show, Caleb's character, and ends up processing the world in different styles of cinema. He has like a noir part, and then it gets crazy. It's actually a really fun episode. But we might see it on like a holodeck episode, but there's not I wouldn't feel it's someone's signature style on a episode. Well, I feel like sometimes I can tell when Frakes is directing.
You can. I haven't been able to tell in season 3, but in season 1 and 2, I could tell which ones Frakes was directing, because he had a certain way with the cast that he could get a better. Honestly, I feel like he could get a better performance out of them, or at least a more natural performance out of them, because he made them feel at ease. But also he did have a little bit of visual flourishes that he would use, because he's one of the only directors that I know of that has directed Star Trek that has also done feature films. The rest of the others have, I believe, done exclusively television work. But they have had some go-to directors, like, I cannot remember his name, but he's directed a few episodes, and every episode he does, he has a close-up on an eye, where he'll have it's in the Philippa Georgiou episode, and it's in the episode in season 2 with the full android lady.
That died in season 2.
It's the episode where she dies, but they have he does close-up shots in a split diopter of the person's eye and someone in the foreground, and it's split right there at the side of their cheek. And it's an extreme close-up of their eye and someone in the background, and it's just one of the things that they do. But so there are some flourishes, but yeah, I think generally speaking, like, I can't really tell the difference between many of the directors.
And again, it's not a bad thing, but
no,
definitely.
I mean, you generally can't tell, like, like a good TV director is, their point is to really kind of not have a style. They're being paid to do a job, and one of the things Cronenberg was talking about is that being a TV director is a very technical job. You've got to be very professional. You've got to come into a set that you may or may not know people. You've got to do a job. You got to film it quick. You've got to get it done and move on. And he can't do that. He has to be involved in the edit. He has to be involved in the ADR work. He has to do all those things because he does features, and that's just like, he's an auteur. So you can't be an auteur and be a television director, essentially. Which is why Tarantino's only done like 2 episodes of CSI.
Did I?
You didn't know Tarantino had done TV, did you?
No, I know he's done TV. I don't know if he knew he. Huh. There might be a gap in the old movie encyclopedia over here.
I'll look it up real quick.
While Cal's doing that, we'll start our wind down and plugs. So we'll get you the official time that Red Shirt Rejects is going to be on a weekly basis. Most likely going to be Mondays, but I don't want to give you the official time here. But look out for on our Facebook page, the YouTube, and the Twitch. You'll see our updated streaming calendar, and you'll know exactly when we're coming out. If you miss us tonight, if you weren't able to watch it live, don't worry, we got you covered because this comes out in audio like your podcasts, and you can also go back and check out our old streams on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. So there's content will always be there and available for you. And just like our other Nerd Union family of shows, we're working diligently to get those edited and broke down to some smaller chunks that you all can enjoy, different segments that we have, like on State of Nerd Union that you all saw earlier tonight, or on the Commander Shipp show that airs on Mondays. At 8 p.m. Central for State of Nerd Union and Commander Shipp show. And then, again, we'll give you an update on Red Shirt fairly soon. Cool. What's up?
Yeah. And yes, so he did 2 episodes of CSI, 1 episode of ER, and an episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Was he just...
I don't know.
He's like, I want to direct it. Hey, Jimmy, I want to direct one of your episodes.
I don't know. I don't know what that thought process looks like. But there it is.
I got it.
It's like the episode Francis Ford Coppola guested on SNL, but he also directed the episode. And it was like a running bit where he would be like directing it and in the skit.
Okay, I'm going to have to check. I'm going to hunt that one down.
It's wild. Not a very good episode, but it's different. Anyways, yep, so that's it.
Woo!
Come join us next time. We'll probably talk about do an episode recap for the next episode, which comes out Thursday on CBS All Access if you're in the US, and I believe Canada, and then in Netflix everywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll be on here. We'll be we might end up taking a season break once Discovery wraps, or when we find out the exact premiere dates for Picard. Because I think Jerry Ryan's Twitter was saying Picard won't film until February.
Yeah, I'm not sure with pandemic things. Who knows? Because but then again, because they film all the new shows they're doing in Toronto, so who knows?
Yeah, it's a matter of getting people there. Can they stay there and stay quarantined for the time that they're... Yeah, because a lot of movie productions have been doing that. Like Thor, Love and Thunder, everybody... That's how we knew people were being involved. Honestly, it's like, oh, you're leaving for Australia, huh? Oh, you're going to stay down there for a little bit? It was like, Natalie Portman bought a house down there? Oh, okay. All right. And we already knew she was going to be involved. I just mean, yeah, but that was kind of the key. So, all right.
All right. And we're out.
See y'all next time.